Welcome to another edition of Dead Air Live. Tonight we have a very unique TV show. As a matter of fact, it's kind of like going to be a horror show. And we have a very interesting guest here, Matt Martino and Alan. Alan, what is your last name?
White.
White. Alan White. How exciting. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
The name of the show is the Drachen Recruitment Experience, but the name of your horror movie is the Drachen Recruitment Experiment.
Correct.
Do tell.
The Drachen Recruitment Experiment does actually sort of describe an experiment that's going to be sort of occurred with the main characters. The main character, who's going to be played by Alan here, he actually finds an ad that you might actually see in the back of a newspaper, like one you'd pick up before you hit the subway, that says, wanted research subjects. But it doesn't really give him all the details. So when he goes in and becomes a subject in this, he finds out that it's a real horror movie. It's a real horror show for him. I mean, he has to torture people, he has to be tortured, all in the name of science. So it really is an experiment. That's being conducted on these people, and I did draw a lot of my inspiration about this experiment from real life experiments that have occurred both in the United States and in other countries on people, on real people. So when I call it the Drachen Recruitment Experiment, I took it from names like the Milgram Experiment, which is a real experiment that was done to people where they were given questions to ask a fake participant, and that fake participant, if they got them wrong, they had to get an electric shock, and they had to see if these experimenters would actually shock a person, and the shocks would increase as they got more answers wrong, and would they shock the person almost to the point where they're dead. So this is a real experiment.
So you're saying it's the Drachen, it's not the Drachen, it's the Drachen. Drachen. What does Drachen mean?
Drachen is actually the German word for dragon, and it was a code word for this experiment because the experiment has been going on for some time now. But I also kind of wanted it to harken back to some sort of psychological roots, because I kind of feel that a horror movie without a certain level of psychology doesn't really have much weight to it. I mean, I could put a lot of gore on screen, but I really wanted the psychological feel to it. And who's really more psychological than our German friends like Freud and so forth? So we kind of harken back to this idea. Plus, there was a bit of a history with the Nazis that actually had done various experiments on human beings. So I kind of wanted to make this connection between a sort of like a national, global, worldwide ideas that have kind of come down and filtered in. And to kind of say that our government really, in our institutions that do these kinds of experiments, really are not much better than some of the people that we condemn for having conducted experiments on people.
I'm a little bit confused. Why would our government or anyone in the world do these torture experiments? And I'm trying to draw some information about the movie, but why would this happen?
I really wanted, if I'm going to make a horror movie, I want it to be about something that's real. I want it to be about something that really is an aspect of society that both fascinates and horrifies. But the United States government has a history of having done experiments on human beings. In the 1950s, for example, they had something called MK Ultra, and this was a program designed to control people's minds, to try and turn people into soldiers, or to extract information from them through the use of drugs, through the use of psychological torture by confining people in small spaces, trying to push them to the breaking point. We did this because we thought we were going to need to interrogate spies, interrogate communist spies.
Oh, okay.
So experiments like this really did occur in the United States in a number of places, and we try to have a lot of watchdog groups now that are kind of watching and making sure these things don't happen. But I don't want these things to happen again, and that's why I kind of bring these things up as a way to make people conscientious of the fact that these are real things that really happen to real people at some point in time.
That's unbelievable. What is your intrigue? Why have you picked this topic, the Drachen Recruitment experiment. I love the name. Or the Drachen.
Drachen.
I'm killing the
You know
name.
what? It's potato and potato, really. I mean,
Okay,
Drachen or Drachen, they are both perfectly acceptable
But
pronunciations.
Why? I mean, do you dream about this stuff? Because you're a special effects guy, you're a filmmaker, and you live right here in Somerville, and it's all happening here in Somerville,
Right.
Massachusetts.
Right.
What is your intrigue? Do you go to bed dreaming about this stuff?
I am very fascinated by human psychology, and so in reading about these psychological experiments, I did have a very strong sort of fascination and intrigue with them. But I think really in the last few years we've heard a lot about torture. We've heard a lot of a debate about whether or not torture is moral, whether or not it's okay to torture an enemy if we can get information from that enemy in order to save more lives.
Is it?
Well, that's a question that we do bring up. I mean, what's the moral implication of it? Because there's a debate. Now, there's part of me that likes to say that if you torture a guy enough, he'll say anything, and then his information is completely useless, because pain is such a horrible thing to endure that people will just say anything to stop it. So if you ask me where are the bad guys, where's the hideout, and you torture me, I'm just going to give you the answer that you want to hear, so you'll stop. So I don't think it's effective.
Okay.
So we got to throw away this effective. Then there's the human side to it. Is it okay to torture someone from a human side? Is it okay to inflict pain on another person? And I don't believe that that's true. No, of course not. I'm not advocating torture. But I'm simply saying that torture is one of these things that's been up in our culture recently, whether or not it's waterboarding terrorists in Guantanamo Bay, or it's that we're humiliating prisoners overseas, but also what are the enemies doing to our soldiers? You know, what are they doing when they capture our soldiers? Are they torturing them to try and get information?
Right.
So I think
it's all about power.
Yeah.
It's all about power, not love. Power.
True, very much so. So I think these are topics that became very, very relevant in the last few years. They were very much news headlines. At the same time, the film does bring up a lot about post-traumatic stress disorder.
Oh boy.
And how people deal with it. What happens when you have very traumatic things that occurred in your past? What happens when you've had a violent past?
It lingers.
Oh, certainly.
You have nightmares. People end up in a hurricane or an earthquake, and their mind is tortured. Why is that? Why does the mind hold on to these memories?
Well, that is something that the movie deals with quite heavily. It does sort of say why is it that these things really, ingrain themselves in people's minds? Why is it we can't just forget about the bad stuff? I mean, I believe that human beings have this sort of psychological mechanism that when something bad happens to us, we don't want it to happen again. So we're constantly reminded of it over and over in dreams.
Isn't that interesting? So you think that's our way of it not happening by thinking about it?
I think it's this survival mechanism that, if you have a traumatic experience happen to you, if something very violent happens to you, you don't want it to happen again, obviously, so your mind never stops thinking about it. It never stops looking for that danger. It always tries to find the next problem that's coming up. So I think it's very difficult for people to overcome this post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's brought up a bit. It's brought up about what happens when a person has a violent past. Does it predispose them to then be violent again because they're stressed out? And the government has done a lot of research on post-traumatic stress disorder, and I think for good reasons, in the last few years, for very good reasons, because we had a lot of soldiers returning from Iraq and Afghanistan, and they had explosions and bullets flying at them, and they came back and were very unable to cope with day-to-day life because of what they saw and what they experienced. So they've had a lot of experiments on how can we help soldiers deal with this.
That's what I want to ask you. Your film, which was shot here in Somerville, is about torture.
Right.
Can torture be reversed? Is that going to be your next movie, the sequel?
Well, when we do the sequel. Can it be reversed? It's tough to say that. I think that the best minds in the country are trying to really deal with those issues. Like, how can we help people that have had traumatic past. I mean, not just soldiers and so forth, but people who are victims of violence in their life, children who've been abused, et cetera, et cetera. You know, how do we help these people, and is there a way to help them? Is there, you know, is it something that you know never goes away from you? I mean, anytime you have a very traumatic experience, whether it's loss of a family member or even just a car accident or something bad happens to you, it always leaves something in you.
It leaves like a residue.
Certainly,
that
right.
never goes away. And we have here Alan White. We'd like to introduce Alan White. Alan, you play the role of Shader, correct?
Actually, I play Chad.
Oh, you play Chad?
Yes.
Shader would be the doctor who's running the experiment.
Oh,
Right.
Okay. And tell us about your role in the Drachen Recruitment Experiment.
Well, Chad is someone who, like many people, is a victim of the down economy in the United States. He's been out of work for a while. And as Matt mentioned earlier, he answers the ad that has been placed for the recruitment experiment because it looks like a way of making some money. He and his girlfriend have some plans for their future that are put on hold by
you were
their
sucked in?
financial crisis. I don't know if I'd say sucked in. He certainly doesn't know everything, all the details about what he's getting himself into, but he does go into it willingly.
Sure.
And it turns out to be more than he expected.
So why did you choose to work with Matt on this horror film? Because that in itself can leave scars on a person. Working on, I mean, true. What about Batman? Who's the young man that died?
Oh, Heath Ledger.
I mean, didn't he have to play the role of the Dark Knight? And he
We played the Joker, yeah.
the Joker. I mean, well, he played with the dark side. Isn't that what it's like working on a horror film? Working with the dark side?
In a speculative way. I mean, as when you're an actor, you hopefully keep a healthy distance from your character. In the moment, you want your character to believe the world and believe the existence of that world, but then you want to be able to go away from that world.
Sure.
And then go home and go back to being yourself. There have been lots of actors who have played horrible, horrible people, and we certainly hope that every actor who plays a serial killer or a mass murderer or a terrorist doesn't take on that role in reality afterwards.
Is there any residue that gets stuck with you, doing a role in a horror movie? Because I looked at the clip, and I got to tell you, I was spooked. I was spooked. I went, whoa, because that's not the type of thing that. I mean, I know a lot of people like horror movies. I like romances and, happy things. So I mean, no disrespect, because I totally admire you, and you're from here, Somerville, and I think it's great what you're doing. But I get really spooked when I look at horror movies. So did it have any effect on you?
Absolutely not. No, it's more the other way around, actually. As an actor, you draw on your life experiences to create the character. If anything, there's more residue of my own experiences that inform my performance of Chad, because Chad goes through things that I haven't gone through. So, such as torture, such as having to make the decision as to whether or not to torture another human being. Thank goodness these are things that I haven't gone through. Chad undergoes some extreme physical and mental abuse that I haven't experienced. But I still had to portray Chad's experiences believably for the camera, for the director, for the to tell that story. So if anything, I would say that as an actor, it's much more your real life experiences that leave residue on the story that you tell, because that's the foundation from that the story comes from.
Now, how did Matt find you? How does someone find an actor in the Boston area, for a horror flick, the Drachen Recruitment Experiment?
Well, much like the Drachen experiment itself, Matt put an ad in the paper, which I answered.
Did you?
I believe
Which
the
paper?
ads. I did things like Craigslist.
Oh, Craigslist.
I found, and I also did things like some more legitimate sources like NewEnglandFilm.com, for example. It's more read by just actors, as well as Craigslist. You take your chances because everyone can look at it. But Stage Source, for example, which is a Boston-based
Sure.
organization, and which I belong to, puts out auditions for all kinds of things, as well as there's some things like Yahoo groups that are just catered to actors. So if you find these things, you can really shoot to an actor what you're looking for, and so forth. So I know that with casting Chad or so forth, we were probably looking for someone who was around this age range, and we sent that out and so forth. So we could play with things, but you want someone who's not so old that you think the torture would kill him. You can't have a 90-year-old man, but you also don't want to have a child either because it's got to be believable.
So was there something about Chad's look? Was it because he wore glasses? What was it about Chad that drew you to know that he was going to be perfect for the part that he played?
Well, I'll tell you, I've actually worked with Alan before. We'd actually done some shows sometime in the past.
I see.
And him and I have done shows where we do stage combat, which is when we fight and sword fight. And we had done a Robin Hood show some years back together.
Very cool.
Yeah, so part of it was that because I had known that he had the ability to fake violence. Mm-hmm. So you talk about this skill of how do you not get scarred by it. Well, I know Alan has studied very extensively this art of stage combat, which means he can get up on stage with a sword and swing it at another actor and still not hurt him. Because even though he can make it look real, internally it's still just acting for him. So that's part of it. But I think Alan, the character of Chad, he's just kind of an everyman. He's not. I didn't need a character that was, particularly muscle bound. I didn't want a guy that looked like he was, like a superstar or anything like that. I needed an average-looking guy because I think he's going to appeal to the average person watching it. He's a guy that, he used to have a job. He lost his job. He needs money. He's a little desperate for money. That's a situation like I think just, everyone can appeal to. So when I chose him as this character, to be in this couple that's nearly starving because they're out of money, you just got to make him look like your average guy out there, and I think he had those kinds of looks. The glasses help. Looks like a typical guy. So
he looks like a very peaceful guy.
Thank you.
He has a very sweet look.
He
Did
does.
that have something to do with it? You said, "Geez, let's take advantage of this really sweet-looking guy."
Looks are important when you cast and so forth, and I kind of wanted a guy that didn't look like he's too much of a menacing figure or something along those lines. I wouldn't have picked a guy that looked like a linebacker who was like
You didn't want a wise guy. You wanted a guy that you knew that you could possibly push around.
Yeah,
a little bit. Sorry.
No, that's
But I'll tell you, having worked with him in more than one arena, I've seen that other side of him. I've seen him play a character that was much more menacing and scary.
Really?
In terms of his ability, because he played a fighter. I remember in the Robin Hood Festival he had played the Moorish character. That if you know the classic story of Robin Hood, when he goes off to the Crusades, he comes back and he brings this Moorish character who's very competent with a scimitar, very good fighter, and so forth. So I know he has that other side to him, but I also know that if you're a good enough actor, you've got more than one side. It's not just you're not one-dimensional.
Sure.
Maybe some actors in Hollywood only play the same role over and over again, but if you've honed your craft well,
Not Alan
Alan
White.
can do more.
So tell us about the clip that we're about to see. Meet Shader. Who is Shader and what's going on here?
Meet Dr. Shader.
Shader.
This is the doctor who's running the film experiment itself. He's the one that actually put the ad in the newspaper, and he's the one that's trying to meet up with these people that have been chosen for the experiment. And what's interesting about this is that, look at the setting. It's kind of like in an alleyway, and he's coming to something called the Drachen Institute, and it's kind of like in a dirty, filthy, junk-filled alleyway, and that's not what you would expect. So that's part of the horror of this, is that he's kind of going into this garage almost in the side of a building for a medical experiment. And that in and of itself should give you an idea of what's to come.
Okay, let's check it out.
Chad Bovinston?
Yeah, that's me.
You're late.
I had trouble finding the place. It's a little off the beaten path. You know, I figured a research institute would be more...
The isolation helps with the research. There are less distractions.
Then why is it next to train tracks?
The train. You'll get used to it. Dampens the noise.
What noise?
We are already behind schedule. We need to get started immediately.
Well, I'm glad I was chosen. How do we begin?
We have paperwork for you. It needs to be filled out, all of it. Every last page, all details are needed.
Sure. I expect when you start a new job, there's tax forms.
Begin.
Wow. This paperwork is going to take 6 weeks. Is that the experiment?
No.
Tell us about the character of Dr. Shader.
Dr. Shader, he's a pretty intriguing character. I call him the lead villain, but there's part of me that doesn't want to call him a villain. He gets these people into this research facility, and then he has them torture each other.
They torture each other?
Oh, they torture each other, yes.
What is that all about?
Well, he's trying to get research compiled, send it off to various think tanks to try and get more funding and more research money so that he can continue it, which is how he keeps his job. In these days when things get cut, funding gets cut on something for research, often they just pack up and leave. You know, they leave the lab or something. And that's the sad reality of being a research scientist, even in a psychological experiment or even a medical experiment. It really is all about whether or not you're capable of getting funding. So he's a little obsessed with getting the right data. And if he can get the right data to hand off to his sponsors, they're going to give him more money and he can keep his job. So he's motivated by money too. I mean, he's motivated by keeping a job in a bad economy. The sad thing is that this has actually led to some fairly, big cases where research facilities, even with drugs, even with psychological research, they sometimes fudge results, or something along the lines of they hide results.
They do?
There have been a lot of cases that have come up that they kind of just give the information that their sponsors want so they can get money, and that's a sad fact of how.
I am blown away. I guess I'm naive.
There have been some drug companies, and I'm not going to specifically name names, but there have been some drug companies that have been brought class action lawsuits because they knew one of their drugs had side effects that they didn't publish. And that's because, if they find out that they have these adverse side effects, then, maybe the drug won't get approved, or maybe they'll have to do more research, or it's going to cost more money. But those things have actually, unfortunately, happened in our society. And then we have these class action lawsuits. Certain antidepressants, for example, they found out actually led to people committing suicide. And that maybe the drug companies knew this. Maybe they had the research data, but they chose to ignore it, and they didn't tell the public about it. There have been certain cases that those things have occurred. So, I mean, research scientists often have this idea that it's all about the data that they get. The other very fascinating thing about the Shader character is the human factor is second to him getting data. So, if people get tortured, it's in the name of science. If people get hurt, it's because we're doing positive research that will eventually help mankind. So he really does feel that way. I really do think that he has this within him to say, that he is doing something good. Like, he doesn't really think he's doing the wrong thing when he brings these people in and has them tortured, despite kind of being a villain in it all. And, he's the research science that watches it. He watches it and he doesn't participate in it, so he never gets his hands dirty.
Isn't that like most people in power? So, Alan, what was your favorite part about this film for you, and how long did it take?
Well, certainly one of the things that was really exciting about doing this film for me was that it definitely gave me the opportunity to push myself as an actor, to portray a character, story, and in situations that I hadn't before. And despite my similarities with Chad as sort of the everyman look, Chad was definitely in situations that I hadn't dealt with. So I really had the opportunity to really sort of get my whole acting toolbox out and really apply my craft to telling the story of this character. The film, the raw shooting of the film took about, I'm tempted to say a month, but that's sort of misleading because we were filming on weekends and they were marathon weekends. I mean, they were 13, 14-hour days of filming.
Wow.
That had to fit in around, people's, sustaining their lives and day jobs and things like that. And so I couldn't give you an accurate count of the number of hours that we actually spent on this film.
It sounds like it was a lot.
It was a tremendous amount. I mean, it was a lot of work on the part of everyone in cast and the crew. It was a real endurance stretch for everyone involved. It's amazing that we all remained as civil as we did with each other for as long as we did and managed to work together really well.
How was Matt as a director?
Matt's fantastic as a director. He makes the best hamburgers there are. But no, Matt is...
Really?
Absolutely.
He's Italian.
He does. Well, there you go. But
I would cook for my cast, yeah.
He was a really...
You would cook for your cast?
Oh, yes, he would.
Yeah.
Right, because it was at your home. As a matter of fact, Gene, I think we have some photographs of Matt, the director, so we'll talk over these photographs. So besides his cooking, what was your favorite thing about Matt directing?
Matt was really good at getting what he wanted from his actors.
How did he do that?
On camera.
Did he do any torture? No, just joking.
I was always a little worried because I mean we were, sometimes we were in this basement with branding irons and jumper cables and car batteries and things. So there was always the fear of not giving Matt the performance that he wanted. But no, he was really good at talking to his actors and getting what he needed out of them. And finding the strength for each individual actor. The way Matt interacted with me for Chad was different from the way that he interacted with the actor playing Shader or with Mary or any of the other actors, and getting really what he needed. And he was really open to trying different things. If an actor needed to be reacting to something that wasn't even on film, he was open to actually having that action take place off camera so the actor could react to it. It was a really powerful skill. He was also very open to collaboration with his actors and finding what was going to work to get the most natural performance out of each actor on set.
Do you want to comment about that, Mr. Director?
My hamburgers are really good. I'll tell you though, one of the big things that I always try to do is keep morale up on the set. Is he said we were doing some very long days. We would start Friday at 6 and we would kind of go until about Sunday at 7 o'clock. Obviously we had time to sleep and so forth, and we had dinner breaks. But
everyone stayed at your home.
A lot of people did. I mean, some people were close by and they wanted their own bed, but we had plenty of couches to crash on.
Really?
Yeah. Because we filmed it in a house here in Somerville that's right on Spring Hill. So we had a nice house that was a location, which was really great. So we had a place that we could film, we could cook, we could do all the things. We had our kitchens, et cetera, et cetera. But if you look at a typical Hollywood movie, they shoot that movie in about 90 days sometimes. And that's, from when they start what's called principal photography to when they finish and they wrap and they have all the footage that they need is 90 days. So we did ours in about 10. And so that meant
pretty impressive.
But what was nice was that we did have a house that we could have these locations, and my crew and my people were really good about being able to dress up different rooms. Sometimes a room needed to be a waiting room, sometimes it needed to be a bedroom. Sometimes it needed to be a place where people were tortured, so we had a basement to do that in. But when working with actors, I really do try to bring out a lot of their own natural qualities and so forth. I think, Dr. Shader, I did have to approach him in a very different manner because he has a very different character, and he sees things very differently. Whereas I think Chad's character, he's much more subdued and reserved, but yet he has a breaking point. And so we have to go and we have to find these little moments. And just like you would deal with a person differently in a given situation, you deal with your actors a little bit differently. But I think Alan was great to work with. I don't think there was a point where I didn't get what I needed.
I think we should look at the clip of Alan and see Alan in action, the Alan photos, if you wouldn't mind,
Sure.
Gene. How many actors were on the set working with you, Alan? Or should I call you Chad?
Whichever. For the majority of the shooting that we did, there were usually 1 to 2 other actors at any time. There were about 5 of us overall, I think, in the cast. Most of the scenes had 2 or 3 people in the scene. And so those were, the principal characters who were in the scene, whether it was 2 torturers and a victim, whether it was, Chad and his girlfriend, or Chad and Shader, or, those were, so the scenes were very focused, very small.
So your girlfriend, not your real girlfriend, but your girlfriend.
Yes,
also
the actress Mary playing Chad's girlfriend.
Was she out of work too, looking for money from the Drachen
Well,
Recruitment
that's something
experiment?
you're going to have to watch the movie to find out.
Oh, thank you very much.
But,
and how much did it pay, by the way, in the movie? I mean,
What?
to be part of the
It was
experiment?
$4,800 for 6 weeks.
Oh,
Would you do it $800 a week? I figured it was about the
Which is
threshold.
very
No.
high. If you actually
It's
look
actually
at
very high.
No.
medical study ads,
Okay.
$4,800 is higher
Most
than most
people
of
would
them.
say, yes, I wouldn't sell my soul for money, but most people would.
The highest I'd ever seen was 3,600, and I think it was 7 weeks. So I just kind of tried to say, well, how is he going to beat that out? And hey,
With $3,600 presently now or back in the 50s?
Oh, no. I mean, you can go right now and pick up any like if you go into the subway, the free magazines that they give you, the free newspapers, the daily newspapers, they'll have ads in the back that say wanted research. Sometimes it's on a specific disease, like say asthma. Say it's for people to quit smoking, or people who are obese and they're trying a new drug for obesity. So you'll see these in there, but sometimes they don't even really tell you what it is. Wanted, like healthy males, like 18 to 35. Wanted for research.
And then they reel you in. and they torture you? Do medical companies do this now?
Well, believe it or not, I mean, these experiments do occur. One of my big inspirations for being a filmmaker was that Robert Rodriguez, who did things like Desperado, but also did Spy Kids. And he's done a number of big Hollywood movies, worked with Antonio Banderas a lot, and worked with Quentin Tarantino a lot. He wrote a book called Rebel Without a Crew. And the way he got his money for his very first movie was he was a research subject in a medical experiment.
Oh, my God.
And it's an interesting read because it's really, he sat there and wrote scripts for his movies while he was in this research facility for weeks in order to get a certain amount of money, and then after that he took that and invested it in his first movie. So that's kind of some of the inspiration about how these experiments are conducted. But he actually mentions that he has 2 scars on either arm because they had done tissue samples where they had taken pieces of his arm, so he has little scars on either arm. So I mean, he actually was left scarred by this. But think about it. You go in there and they're giving you pills, and it could be a sugar pill, it could be an experimental drug. You don't know.
And they can kill you. And you probably have to sign a waiver saying, I could die from this, but it's okay.
I'd like to think that they test it on animals before it goes to humans so that it doesn't just kill you right away. But they can have adverse side effects, and that's one of the things they check. They want to make sure that if we're giving this to people and we're selling it, that the drug is reasonably safe to give to the population, and if it has side effects, that they're aware of them, whether it's could be something like headaches, dizziness, constipation. Well, they need to know this. They need to know that some segment of the population has these side effects.
When I listen to Jimmy Tingle, he's telling his jokes. He says, and so they want you to take this drug, and there's about 20 side effects. And why even bother taking the drug?
Yeah.
So, you did a Hollywood movie here in Somerville,
Right.
the Drachen Recruitment Experiment. I keep saying the name because I want people to remember. Can we show that Facebook slide of what it looks like for what people can find on Facebook?
Sure.
And if people want to find you on Facebook, tell us.
If you type the Drachen Recruitment Experiment into any search engine, you're going to come up with us. It's a pretty unique name. I'm pretty certain that there is not anything else that's connected to the
Yeah,
Drachen.
we want to talk about this a little bit. The the tattoo. What is that? What is going on here?
Well, interesting enough, that was an extra that was interested in doing it, and he had that tattoo because he was a medic in the Marines. And I thought it was a really interesting one to see because it's kind of an angel of death, but it's also the medical symbol, the snakes around the serpents. So I thought it kind of is an interesting symbol because Shader is a doctor, but he's kind of a doctor that's dealing out, a certain amount of pain and torture, and I think that's represented. But that actually, I guess, is a common tattoo that medics in the Marines have. Now, next to him is a D, and he's branded with the D because all of the people who are in the Drachen Recruitment Experiment are branded.
Oh, okay.
And they have a D burned onto their arm so that they know that they're members of the experiment.
It's like being in the Nazi camp. They give you a number.
I did kind of bring it up, the idea that, well, first of all, these people are not humans anymore, they're cattle.
Right.
So, they're literally branded like animals. But yeah, the Nazis did that to dehumanize people because it's much easier to think of a person as a number than it is to think of them as a human being. So in this case, we think of them as a test subject, as an animal, as something that's now property because they've been branded by this research university. Again, I mentioned Robert Rodriguez, the Hollywood director, had actually gotten scarred in one of these medical experiments. So there's part of me that says that it's not that far off from the truth that something like that would happen. It's a little dramatic. It's a little different, but it's Hollywood, as we said. It's something for a film that a person's actually branded physically. But these experiments sometimes leave scars. So
if people want to find you on Facebook, how do they find you?
Go onto Facebook and search the Drachen Recruitment Experiment. We certainly have a fan page. You're welcome to try to look us up. We also have a MySpace page. But really what we're going to do is we're going to collect as many fans as we can on those pages. And that's really the way that things get done these days because, website, you can put things up on the website. But Facebook, we can put pictures, video, as well as have all of our fans and tell them the next time our film is screening. So
tell us, if you wouldn't mind, the both of you, what is the next step? You did a Hollywood film here in Somerville. I understand you're going to be going to the American film market.
Correct.
At the end of October?
It's actually the beginning of November. It usually is the end of October and early November.
And are you going with him?
We haven't talked about it yet. We'll see.
Really? I think it's always good to have reinforcement. It gives you like that strength.
I have never been to LA, so I'm very excited about taking it all in. But at this point, I'm actually going to be going there to meet with people that...
Oh, you are? Good.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
We're already making contacts to people in Los Angeles and people in the industry about taking a look at this film, seeing what it is. So really, the American Film Market is a great place to bring a film if you're a new filmmaker and not only use it as a resume piece. Here's a film I've done, but also to try and sell it. And there's sellers from all over the world, all over the country, and so forth. But I really think this film, where it's a low-budget film and it's an early film, it's got really two paths it can take.
Which is?
Well, the first one would be that we actually get a distributor and that we do sell this and then it has a life. Maybe it gets shown late at night on television around Halloween, for the next 10 years. It might make it to on demand. We'll have DVD sales. We can certainly get it into places like Amazon.com. But really, my idea with this is that someone sees the bigger picture and we see sequels. We see remakes. Remakes are really big these days, especially in horror movies. And then it kind of becomes a franchise that has a life of its own. It's really a lofty goal, but
it's not lofty. If you don't dream big, it's not going to happen.
That's what I'd like to see. I mean, because even some very low-budget films have gone on to have very successful franchises surrounding them, especially horror films. a lot of films like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, even Night of the Living Dead. They spawned many sequels, even though the original film was not necessarily a big Hollywood production. So there's the possibility of that, and I'd like to think that, you know, the door's open for those kinds of things to happen. At the same time, you know, as a first-time filmmaker going into this American film market, I'm the new guy on the block. So, but we're going to see, because I'm already setting up some meetings and hoping to get in to meet with a lot of the Hollywood elite and Hollywood executives and so forth.
Well, that makes you exciting if you are new, because everybody's always looking for fresh blood. What a bad term to use.
Fresh blood.
But isn't that what
Very
they say?
appropriate.
It is very appropriate. So you are also a special effects guru.
True.
And did you create many special effects?
Believe it or not, because I was the director, I
Right.
really wanted to be the director, and therefore I actually had a special effects makeup person hired.
Oh, you had another. Wow.
And although I did do some help and assisted with them, a lot of the special effects in this were driven by other special effects makeup artists. I had two, Mary and Billy. Mary actually played the lead female character, and she's actually gone on to a very successful career in special effects makeup. She worked for many years locally at Barrett's Haunted Mansion, and now she's gone on to Universal Studios in Florida to do
Wow.
makeup for them for their Halloween show.
And she
So-
came. She was here for you.
She was here and she did some of the special effects makeup. My other special effects makeup artist was a gentleman by the name of Billy Coyne, and he owns Two-Headed Productions. And he actually trained professionally as a makeup artist with Tom Savini, who's a famous makeup guru, and did a lot of movies like Creep Show and a lot of stuff from the 80s and so forth. And he's still doing films.
The Creep Show.
Creep Show, yeah.
Well, was
Creep
that
Show.
the little? Was that the little? I don't know. No, I'm getting confused. I'm thinking of the little. Never mind. I'm getting excited.
So you know, he brought a lot to the table too with special
Yeah.
effects makeup. So I was kind of the assistant. It was nice because then I could concentrate more on being the director and working more with the actors and really sculpting the overall picture.
Is this your first time you've ever directed?
It's my first time directing a feature film, correct?
Wow. And how long is this feature film?
Right now, it's going to be about 75 minutes, which makes it a short feature. I mean, it's a feature film if it's over 60 minutes.
Right.
Usually they go to about 90. At 75 minutes, it does fit into the feature film category. But I mean, you know, so many short films get made these days that features stand out. So that's why.
You were mentioning that this could possibly get redone if someone picks it up. I don't understand that. You put so much time into it, and it's, you know, looking at it, it looks complete. So why would someone redo something that's complete?
You know, I ask myself that question every time I go and see a remake. But they've remade some very big movies. Psycho was remade. Why would they remake a movie that was really, really well done?
You mean it?
They did remake Psycho, and I mean, that's probably one of the best horror films ever made. But they just remade The Karate Kid. They've remade lots of horror films. They remade things like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. All these films get remade, and I sometimes question, like, you know, why are they doing these remakes? Well, I think if people like the original,
Leave it alone.
well, true, but I think they're going to go see the new version of it just to compare, you know?
Okay.
So remakes are big. I mean, remakes are definitely a successful business model in Hollywood.
But
So-
the new version also reintroduces the film to an entirely new audience. To an
Oh.
audience that has a palette based on the current filmmaking technology and special effects. So you don't want to go and take the early 80s version, for example, of Friday the 13th and show it to your late teens, 20 audience of today, because the special effects aren't going to match
You know, that's
what they want to
really
see.
good
So they
point, Alan.
remake the story with the
Right.
current technology and
Right.
reintroduce it to whole new generations of audiences.
Right. So where do you see this going? What's the next step, Alan, for you doing this film? Do you think this is going to be to springboard you into the next phase of your career? Is this going to jumpstart your life, your acting career?
You know, as an actor, you don't. I guess some people look for that big thing that's going to springboard them. I don't think that this is going to springboard me into the next, you know, big thing so much as this is a solid addition to my resume, to my reel, to my experience. You know, when a the next film director that I audition for looks at my resume, he sees that I'm an actor who can deliver in a feature film. You know, in a leading role in a feature-length production, I can show up to the set and give a believable, consistent, powerful, compelling performance.
I believe in you right
you know,
now.
That and
Yes.
Matt has to give me first dibs on the role of Chad when he gets that huge budget to remake the film. That's the
Well,
deal. That's what I got.
You know, there's the second part to the answer of why a remake. We made this in a very limited budget, mostly volunteer cast and crew who put up tremendous efforts. If Hollywood gets interested in this film and they hand us a big check for millions, because a low budget film in Hollywood's $10 million, that means that I can bring back the cast and crew and really, you know, make a much more solid film. You know, so obviously a remake would be better. I mean, if I were to tell you you're going to build a house and you can only spend $10,000 on it, how good is that house going to be?
It's not going to be good at all.
Well, what if you could spend $1 million on that house? It's going to look
The
better.
possibility is going to be endless.
So a movie's the same way. Even though we did our absolute best, I think that we could with a very limited budget, with a very dedicated crew and very dedicated actors. You know, it's still a very low budget film, and more money always makes a better movie.
I'd like to look at the clip, Drake and tease it.
I'm curious if your mind is burdened with images.
What? What are you asking?
Is your mind filled with things? Images? Sights that you cannot get out of your head?
Yes.
Good.
So much to this.
Yeah, you know, I just met with my composer about really how we're going to get this whole film together musically. But he actually, believe it or not, you can go to school and become a professional film scorer. And he actually went to right here in Boston, to the Berklee School of Music, and is a professional film composer. So I think he did some pretty tremendous work.
Phenomenal work, because it makes you sit, it's like, I was like, I didn't want to watch it because the music, if you don't have the right sound, you have nothing. I mean, I shouldn't say you have nothing, but it really adds that frosting on the cake.
Yeah, I really do. I think that I got very lucky that my composer is just really enthusiastic about working in this medium to do a horror movie, because he hasn't really done a lot of that kind of film. And that he's very talented, that he really has a passion for doing music and film, and that was his major. I think he said something like there's only six places you can major in film scoring, and like two are in LA, two are in New York, one is somewhere in like Chicago.
Right.
So it's very odd to me that there's a place in Boston where you can do it.
I went to Berklee.
Yeah.
They had a great film scoring department back in '76. Well, that was a long time ago.
But they're still doing it. They're still doing it. So
yeah,
they're still. So I think I got pretty lucky with the score, and I think it's gonna once it's
very
completed. it's gonna sound excellent.
Very lucky. So when you go to this American film market, are you going to bring like an iPhone with you so you could show people if you want to meet someone on the floor? How does that all work?
Well, believe it or not, I mean, the American film market, as far as I can tell, the way it's set up is the big executives have their own offices.
Oh, they have their own suites, right? And
They get their
invite
own
you in.
suites, and of course, that's where we want to get in because those are the big names. And I think if you're working for one of the major film studios, you have a DVD player somewhere.
Oh, of course they do.
I do
yes.
have a portable DVD player. I'll probably wind up bringing it to show people. But also the floor has DVD players. It also has, I guess, ways that you can screen film. If, say, for example, you had shot it on, Super 8 or 16 millimeter or 35 millimeter, which is what many professional films are done. They have ways that you can screen those things for people because it's a film market. I mean, if they didn't have, I'm sure they have VCRs and they probably have Betamax. I mean,
Sure.
They probably have every medium there that's represented so that people can show films, and that's really what it's about.
And how many people will be attending this American film market?
Boy, I think they said about 800 different countries or not countries, different distributors are represented, or different businesses are represented. So 800 different businesses, possibly bringing 3 or 4 people plus additional attendees. It's several thousand. So
How is this different from MIPCOM that is in France in October, or the NATP convention, the National Association for TV Program Executives, that's in Las Vegas in January? How is that different?
the American film market is the biggest film market in the United States.
Okay.
The one that you talked about, like in France, for example.
The MIPCOM.
Yeah, it's in France for one thing. So I mean, the big difference is this is the American film market, and there's a lot of people who say, well, you got to go to France to buy their movies, but really, I think filmmaking is an American industry. So. Hollywood's in the United States. Most of the big budget films are still coming out of Hollywood. So I really think that's the place where the major American studio executives are going to have their biggest show of force. And I'm sure they've got the money to go to France and so forth. But again, other conventions, like you said, television conventions and so forth, they do cater to TV and we're a film. So we're not trying to sell a television show necessarily.
We have another clip that we want to look at with the production, and we have a couple more minutes, and then we'll wrap it up. So, yeah. So anyway, tell us about the production end a little bit, Alan. Was it a good production? Did they have high values, that sort of thing? Because did you shoot with 1 camera, 2 cameras, 3 cameras?
We shot with 1 camera and 1 boom mic. I mean, we were making a film on almost no budget.
Sure.
Part of what was really exciting from my perspective was at the very first audition, Matt was telling me about his ideas for this film and how he had this house, and he said, okay, how can I make a film using this house as a location? How many different locations can I create in this film?
Oh, endless.
And that level of innovation was really exciting. We got really creative with the creation of the location, the set pieces, the props, the different camera angles. I mean, we really squeezed the maximum that you could out of real estate and possessions and things in the creation of this film.
Okay, so director or special effects guy, you have 1 minute, wrap it up. Yeah.
Oh man, I mean, I love doing both. I think though, being the reason why I'm a director is that I really like being the driving force behind the productions that I work on.
Sure.
And I feel that in order to give myself good projects and the ability to give other people good projects, really takes someone who, at least from the top down, is seeing a big picture. And I like to see that big picture. I haven't given up doing special effects makeup and special effects for other films, but directing, I love doing directing, and I'll tell you, here's why I want to be a director. There is nothing like seeing your film shown up on a big screen. It's seeing your work come to fruition is really, really, really an amazing feeling, and
You're gonna do it.
Great, thank you.
Congratulations. This is great.